Let me know if you remember when I said this.
And my goal, and I'm putting it here just so I have, that social stuff, making sure that people can push me to this, is to win over $100,000 in 2 years, okay?
So here I am in January 2022, and I gotta be honest, I smashed that goal. While I said that I was going to do it over a 2-year period, I was able to achieve that. But the really interesting thing is I was actually able to generate $100,000 in grant funding in 12 calendar months. So last year in 2021, from January to December, I was able to get well over $100,000 in grant funding for the different clients that I work with. Now me, I am a grant writer and I do work with a lot of different artists, but I want to show you guys, the artists and producers and creators watching at home who are interested in grant funding, how you can do the same thing. You don't necessarily need to be a grant writer to achieve this, but you do need to be clear and take action on what I'm about to show you. So if you're really curious about how to do this yourself, stay tuned, because throughout this video, I'm going to break down how I was able to achieve this goal and how you could do the same. Are you ready? Let's go. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is your boy 5Piece, producer, engineer, and officially grant writer extraordinaire, as you may be able to tell from the title and theme of this video. Now, grant writing is something that I do, and I don't always talk about on this channel. I do have a couple of videos about it, but it's definitely something that I want to explore a little bit more on my channel because there's a lot of people out there who could use help in the funding department especially. And I am going to be honest, grants are not something that's available to everybody. It's really going to depend on where you are located in the world. I'm personally in Canada, and Canada has hundreds of millions of dollars available in arts funding every single year. All you got to do is be an artist or a musician or a creator, and you got to know how to tap into it, okay? You don't necessarily need to hire grant writers and do these things. I completely learned on my own, but as a result of that, I've started helping other people by grant writing for them. So I'll apply on behalf of a lot of different individuals, different artists, and help them get money to, fund their albums or their single projects, their music projects, to pay for music videos, to promote and market their releases, to tour the world, to perform, to do all kinds of stuff like that, and really to execute their vision. The beauty of this is it's free money that you're able to get, and all you got to do is see through the vision that you propose, and at the same time, what will happen is you'll be able to create something that you can then put out and leverage to make more money later on and make a living, right? And that's what the dream is really all about when it comes to being in music. And I'm so appreciative that we have these opportunities in Canada specifically. Now, the truth is this stuff may not necessarily apply to every single person. So as you're watching, you have to be mindful that what I'm talking about is my experience as a Canadian navigating the Canadian music grant scene. However, I do have some interesting content coming down the pipeline for people in different geographies, especially the Americans out there, because I know a lot of Americans are constantly asking me about music grants. I gotta be honest, there's a lot more limited opportunities to you guys, but I have been able to uncover a few, so stay tuned and definitely subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, so that way you can see that content when it goes live on my channel. So let's talk about 2021 and what I was able to achieve, and specifically how much I was able to get for each of the clients that I work with. Now, once again, I did apply for these as a grant writer on behalf of different individuals, and they obviously hired me because they knew that they could trust me and my expertise to actually win them this funding, because on average, about 10% of applicants get funded. Well, in my case, I was able to get 55% of my applications funded. So what do I mean by that? So I sent in 11 applications that I've actually gotten results back on. Now, to be fair, I do still have 7 grants that I'm waiting on results on, but I'm just going to rope them in and include them in my 2022 breakdown if and when I decide to do that. But for all the grants that I've sent in this year, I sent in 11 applications, and they ranged in value from as little as $2,000 to as much as $40,000. Now, of those 11 applications, I was able to get 6 of them funded. So 5 got rejected, 6 got funded. And at the same time, as much as I want to win them all, it is a competitive process, and I'm usually playing with the variables that is someone's career. And a lot of times, the folks that didn't get accepted, those 5 rejections that I'm talking about, a lot of the time it was just because they didn't have enough proof of concept. The grants were perfectly fundable. It was just a matter of competition and them not having enough proof that they could do what we were trying to do in the grant itself. But at the end of the day, 55% of the applications that I sent in were funded, and this is significantly better than the industry average of 10%. So if you're an artist applying on your own, you have about a 10% chance of winning. But clearly, by working with someone like myself or a professional grant writer that knows what they're doing, you could potentially increase your chances of winning at least fivefold. Now, these grants varied in terms of different organizations that I applied to. So for example, I sent in 3 Canada Council for the Arts grants, 4 Ontario Arts Council grants, 2 Factor grants, and 1 Radio Star Maker grant. These are all grant organizations that are based in Canada. Some are specific to the province of Ontario, which is where I am, but others are Canada-wide, and you can apply to them as well. I definitely encourage that you check them out if these are new to you so you can learn more about their process. And the truth is, some of these grants you couldn't just apply to. There was some barrier to entry, and that's obviously why I wanted to apply to them. Like as an example, Radio Star Maker, not everyone can apply to that grant. You need to have certain sales thresholds that you meet, and fortunately I have clients that were able to meet those thresholds already throughout their career, so it just made sense to apply to that because the competition was less fierce. Same thing goes for Canada Council for the Arts. Canada Council for the Arts only wants to fund what they deem to be a professional artist, and that requires artists jump through certain hoops in order to qualify. Not everybody is going to qualify, unfortunately, but I was able to qualify most of the applicants that I represented, and at the end of the day, a bunch of them got funded, as you could tell. Now, like I mentioned, I was able to secure just over $111,000 in the calendar year of 2021, but the truth is I mentioned that I still have 7 grants outstanding, and those are actually worth an additional $110,000. So potentially 2021 could be a $200,000 year, which would be amazing, but I'm not going to, count all my chickens yet. I'm going to wait until I get the results, and I should be finding out roughly within the next 2 months. So by February or March, I'll have some solid answers, and maybe I'll follow up with another video when that happens. But as you can tell, I did a bunch of stuff here and I was able to win these grants for these people, and I really realized that there's a couple of key takeaways that I've gotten from this experience, and I wanted to share those with you guys. So it doesn't matter if you're a grant writer like me. I know that that's where I'm kind of speaking on right now, but what I want to do is I want to break down some key insights that I pulled away from this experience for the individual artist. So if you're a solo artist or a group that's making their own music, representing themselves, and wants to get some additional funding, I'm going to break down some key takeaways that you should listen to and follow in the upcoming months if you decide to pursue grant funding on your own. Now, the first insight is do your research. Do some research to figure out what grant opportunities are available to you. Now, this is really going to depend on your geography, okay? Based on where you are in the world, you may or may not have access to this stuff. And based on where you are in Canada, for all the Canadians out there, you might have access to some opportunities over others. As an example, you heard me mention Ontario Arts Council. Only Ontario artists can apply to that. I also have some clients in British Columbia and other provinces, but they can't apply to Ontario Arts Council. We have to apply to their own unique organization that's based in British Columbia or the geo that they're from. So what you want to do is you want to do some research and figure out what opportunities are available to you and make sure that you're qualified for them. Now, I know you might be wondering, well, how do I find these opportunities? Luckily for you, I've shot a video where I talk all about where to find music grants. I'm going to leave a link to that up above right now, and I'll put it in the description below. So definitely check that out if you're curious and want to know where you can find funding opportunities in your area. Now, before I continue talking about the next takeaway for my 2021 year, I wanted to mention, if you guys haven't checked out my free grant writing course, Music Grants 101, I highly recommend that you do that. I'll leave a link to it in the description below, but essentially this course prepares you to write your first or next music grant. So if you want to just figure out where you should be applying to, what you should be mindful of, what kind of materials you need to get together in order to actually pursue funding, this is a great course to take, and again, it's 100% free. I do have some paid products as well, but I'm not here to sell you that stuff. If you get value out of my content, if you get value out of the free course, definitely consider paying for the premium one, where I break down things a little bit deeper. I show you more examples from winning applications. Some of these applications that I've talked about in this video, for example, will be shown in the course, in the paid course, of course. But definitely check out these courses, as they're amazing resources. And I'm telling you, nobody ever showed me this stuff. I had to learn the hard way. I'm literally spoon feeding you all the goods that you need. And the crazy thing is, I've had a lot of great replies from a lot of different people who have purchased the premium course, who have told me, hey, Dan, Thanks so much, man. Because of you, I actually won this Factor Artist Development Grant, or I won this OAC grant, or I won this other grant. So many people have had amazing reactions and responses to the course, and I'm just so happy that I can help other people along the way. So if you get value out of this video, definitely check out the course and definitely check out the other stuff that I have available at findingfunding.ca. But with that in mind, let's get back to these takeaways and other things that I learned while winning $100,000 in the 2021 calendar year. Now, the second thing I've already alluded to, but you want to make sure that you're qualified for these grants, okay? So certain grants, like I said, have a barrier to entry. Some of them have sales thresholds that you need to meet, so some commercial viability stuff. Some of them want you to be a professional artist, and they have different criteria on how they measure that. For example, they may want you to have a certain amount of performances under your belt, or a number of releases under your belt, or maybe even a revenue threshold. They want you to have made a certain amount of money as an artist, not as like a, this is my side part-time hobby, but like this is my full-time thing. I've made at least $30,000 as an artist performing the world. That's the kind of stuff they may want to see. Not all grants have these criteria though, of course. Some grants will pretty much fund anybody as long as you have a solid creative vision and have a proof of concept. Now, proof of concept is something I've talked about a lot in different videos. And one video that I recommend that you watch if you haven't seen it yet is 5 things to do before you apply for a grant. I'll leave a link to it up above right now and in the description below. But check that video out. And one thing that I talk about again is that proof of concept. And what that means is anything that you want to achieve or do with the grant, you want to make sure that you've already done it or done something like it. So that way you have proof that you can actually do it. Grant organizations aren't just going to blindly trust every single person and give you money. And because it's such a competitive process, the people who have more proof that they could do what they're asking for are ultimately going to be the ones that get the funding. So if you want to do a music video and you've never done a music video, well, guess what? Make sure you have a proof of concept in the form of a music video that you've already done, and make sure that it's out there on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever, but make sure that that proof is out there. You want to do an album? Make sure that you have an album out there. Even if it's an EP, it's okay to say I want to do an LP and get funding for that and I've never done it, but make sure that you have an EP out at least to prove that you can actually see through a project of that scale and connect the dots and show that you can actually pull it off. Now, the third takeaway is you want to make sure that you have enough time to apply to everything, okay? Now, I mentioned that you want to first figure out which grants and opportunities are available to you. And right now, I can tell you, if you're in Canada, you have Factor, you have Canada Council for the Arts. If you're in Ontario, you have those two, plus you have Ontario Arts Council. If you're in Toronto, where I am, you also have Toronto Arts Councils. That's 4 opportunities right there. And we haven't even talked about other things like Radio Star Maker, Ontario Creates, the SOCAN Foundation. There's a whole bunch of different opportunities that I'm mentioning here. And right there alone, I think I just listed 7 opportunities for people that are based in Ontario. But a lot of those opportunities aren't exclusive to Ontario. They're also open to other places. And other places also have their own unique grant organizations. Going back to that British Columbia example, you might have Factor, Canada Council for the Arts, SOCAN, and then you might have your own, BC Arts Council and things of that nature. So you might have 7 of your own unique opportunities with a few overlapping. But either way, you want to make sure that you have enough time to apply to all of these different opportunities, because a lot of times what happens is a lot of these organizations have deadlines that are clustered together. So for example, Canada Council for the Arts might have a deadline in April, Ontario Arts Council might have one in May, and Factor might have one in June. Well, you have a month between each, but it's not that simple. These are pretty intricate applications that require a lot of organization, that require certain support materials and all that. And the thing is, you really want to have as much time as possible to craft the best application. Whenever I'm taking on a new client as a grant writer, I want to make sure that I have at least 6 to 8 to 12 weeks ahead of a deadline to get things organized. And it's not because it actually takes that long to create the application. Really, it's because we want to have as much time to fine tune and finesse the application, catch any errors, or just anything that doesn't make sense. A lot of times it's really the stuff that doesn't make sense. You have these ambitious plans and you haven't explained them enough or proven that you can actually see them through, and we want to have that time to do that. Sometimes an artist wants me to apply for a grant for them and they've never released music before, and you need that 12 weeks so that way we can figure out, okay, well, what can you release in the next 12 weeks before the deadline to prove or create that proof of concept, so that way when we actually turn in the application, they'll actually be able to see that you can do what we're trying to, pitch in the situation here. And not only that, you have to realize that the timeline is important in terms of when you're going to get the funding. Just because you've applied on a certain date, that doesn't mean that that's when you're getting the money, right? A lot of people make that mistake. They think that they're going to get the money very instantly. It's not like that. In fact, it's usually 3 to 4 months after a deadline is when you're going to figure out your results. So if I applied to a grant in January, I'm not finding out if I won it or got rejected until April or May, usually, right? And even then, I might not get the money right away. So really, you have to be ahead of yourself in terms of timeline. You have to know what you're doing 12, 16, or 24 months in advance. So even right now in January 2022, all the clients I'm taking on, I'm talking to them about what their plans are for the fall and winter of 2022 and even 2023 and beyond. That's how far ahead of yourself you have to be with grants. So you want to make sure that you have that timeline down pat in terms of enough time to apply and enough time on the back end to sit on the music, not release it that you've applied with, because you can't. You have to wait until you get your results, and then making sure that you know how it's going to flow after the fact. Once you get the money, what are your release plans after you get the funding and are able to see through the project? Hopefully this makes sense, but time is a huge commodity and extremely important when it comes to granting. Now, another thing that I've talked about in some of my other videos is you want to make sure that your content is fundable. And I've had this issue with a few different artists, and usually I don't even take these people on, not because I don't want to, but because their content violates these grant organizations' mandates. I actually have a great video about this. I think I called it Why Your Song Won't Win a Grant. I'm going to leave a link to it up above right now or down below. But basically, depending on the content of your music, of your videos, of what you do, you may or may not be eligible for funding. So for example, grants are typically provided by government bodies or agencies that represent the government. Usually the government is giving them money and trusting them to do good stuff with that money, right? It's government money. And government money doesn't want to subsidize pimps and hoes and drug dealers and trafficking and all kinds of, negative, so to speak, stuff, right? Don't get it twisted. I love hip-hop music. I love ignorant music especially. It's my favorite stuff. But at the end of the day, grants are probably not going to fund you if you're talking about murdering somebody while popping a Molly, drinking lean, and doing all kinds of other crazy stuff, right? Again, I can enjoy that music, but at the end of the day, these grant organizations that are dispensing government money, they usually have rules that prevent you from being funded or prevent your content from being funded. Now, if you are an artist that makes this type of music, and again, I love this music, by the way, it's one of my favorite styles. If you make this music, it's not all done for you, okay? What you need to do is start to step out of the box and explore different lanes, different types of content. Maybe you don't make music and turn in music to grants that covers these things. Maybe you focus on, the love songs and, the uplifting stuff, or just stuff that's different. It doesn't even need to be uplifting. It can still be aggressive or sad or cover different emotions. But at the end of the day, it just can't violate their standards. And usually those standards are based on the law. So whatever is illegal is usually not going to fly in terms of granting. Hopefully that makes sense, but definitely check out that video I mentioned to get some more insight and see me literally referencing from some of these grant organizations' mandates and showing you, what they say you should not be doing when you're applying to a grant in terms of your content. And the final thing is you want to keep applying regardless of results. So, you're ahead of yourself. You understand the timeline. Your content is solid. You know what opportunities are available to you. You followed everything else that I've mentioned, but now you're turning in your grants and you're starting to get your answers, okay? Maybe we're 4 months, 5 months into the future, and now you're getting accepted or rejected. If you get rejected, take it in stride, okay? I definitely, had a hot side at one point. I had a temper where I would get rejected and I'd be really upset about it. And I would be, cursing and wanted to cuss somebody off and all that stuff. But that stuff isn't productive. You have to realize this is a long game, okay? If you get rejected, don't take it personally, okay? Every grant is super competitive, and a lot of times what ends up happening is you probably had a super fundable application, but there was just too much competition, and there was more people that applied that had maybe a little bit more going for them. Maybe they had better proof of concept. Maybe they had a better concept in general. You know what I mean? So you can't really be too upset when you get rejected. Instead, you want to just be productive and figure out maybe where you went wrong. Where did you fall short on? And how can you do better next time? A lot of grants do allow you to reapply soon after. A few of them don't. Like Factor usually prevents you from applying for another 12 months. So that one can be a little bit annoying for some, I understand. But a lot of other grants, Ontario Arts Council, Canada Council for the Arts, they'll all allow you to apply multiple times throughout the calendar year, usually 2 or 3 times. So if you shoot and miss, you can always wind up another shot and try again. So that's if you get rejected. Well, what if you get accepted? Well, definitely feel good about yourself. Celebrate the victory. I get super amped every single time, and I'm always happy for my clients when I secure funding, as you can imagine. But don't let that, get to you. You also have to now realize you have to see through your project. You have to commit to the promise that you've made. You said you're going to do this thing. Well, now you're getting the money. It's not over. We're actually just beginning, right? Now you have to actually see it through all the way and make sure that you complete your project appropriately so that way you maintain good standing with an organization, because a grant is two things. It's applying to the grant and basically winning it, right? And the second part is completing it, which means keeping it. Because if you don't complete it, if you don't file your final reports, if you don't turn in invoices and receipts and make sure that they know how you spent the money and make sure that you spent it appropriately, grant organizations can take back the funding, and basically that funding became a loan. And we don't want loans, right? We want a grant that we can keep, with no strings attached. I don't want to have to pay somebody back with interest after the fact. If we want to do that, let's just go to the bank, right? So definitely make sure that regardless of your outcome, you're always thinking ahead and you're taking it in stride, whether victorious or if you get a rejection, just take it in stride, keep going, and don't forget to keep planning ahead, because at the end of the day, while you did win one grant, I look at this as something that you want to continuously do for years at a time. You want to be able to do this repeatedly. So being in good standing with an organization is incredibly important, and being able to be ahead of yourself and know what you have going on in the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months is helpful, because then you can look to the future and say, okay, I got this grant in April. Now I have to complete it and make sure that I see this through by next April, so I have a full 12 months. And then once that's completed, what am I going to apply to then? What project am I going to be working on then, right? We don't want to obviously lose sight of the present moment and what's right in front of us, but we do want to be mindful of what's ahead so that way we can continue to do this, because deadlines sometimes only happen once or twice a year. And if you miss one, you're going to be sitting and waiting for another 6 or 8 months or however long it takes for that deadline to approach. So those are my big takeaways for my 2021 calendar year and the grants that I won in the process. I'm super thankful that I was able to not only achieve my goal, but exceed it. And now I'm on track to do double that in 2022. Maybe I'll even get further than that. I'll be keeping you guys updated as I work through it. But I hope you got value out of this video. If you did, please smash that like button until it turns blue, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, so you can actually see my future content when it goes live. Now, what I want to ask you guys is, where are you from in the world? What city, what state, what province, what country? Let me know, because based on where you are, I'm going to be doing some additional research and figuring out what grant opportunities are available to you, but I'm not going to know unless you tell me. So right now, you watching at home, leave it in the comments below. Say, I'm writing from Alabama, I'm writing from New York, I'm writing from Philippines. Wherever you are, write it down in the comments below so I know. I'm going to do some research for you guys, and I'm going to come back with some more helpful knowledge regarding grants and getting you funded in the future. All right? Appreciate you guys for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Peace.
5,